My parents decided to take my sister on a vacation instead of me, and wouldn't you know it, she ended up wrecking the whole trip and got herself arrested. Only then did they finally start to see her for who she really is. I'm 24 now and my younger sister Leanne is 19. To be honest, I've come to believe she might just be the worst person I've ever known. For years, I tried getting my parents to see the truth, but they never listened, at least not until this recent disaster. Just for context, things between me and my parents have always been a little rocky, and a lot of that comes down to Leanne. They've always treated her like she walks on water. After my mom had a miscarriage years ago, losing the baby really took a toll on her. So when Leanne was born a few years later, they saw her as a miracle, a second chance that brought hope and healing. From then on, Leanne became the center of everything. My parents gave her all their attention and love like she was the sun and we were all just orbiting around her. Now don't get me wrong, I cared about her a lot when we were little. But it didn't take long before I started noticing that Leanne had this weird knack for manipulating people. Nobody else seemed to pick up on it. She always found a way to twist things around to make herself look like the victim. I remember one birthday when I got this old pocket watch from our grandparents. It was beautiful, and my grandmother told me it had been in the family for generations. I was thrilled to have it. But Leanne got all pouty and jealous, asking if she could use it too. I told her no, it was a gift for me, and it was special. She tried getting our parents to step in, but since it came from our grandparents, they stayed out of it. That night, knowing full well that I was terrified of spiders, she snuck a spider into my pillowcase. I woke up in the dark with it crawling on my face and screamed so loud it brought my parents running. Leanne put on this whole act of being concerned, but when we were alone, she just smiled this weird, smug smile and admitted she did it to teach me a lesson. No guilt. Just cold. Another time, I had a big crush on this guy named Derek from school. I finally worked up the courage to invite him over to watch a movie. I was nervous but excited, and I even picked out a nice dress just for the occasion. But the second he walked in, Leanne accidentally dumped a glass of juice all over my dress, and then started laughing like it was the funniest thing she'd ever seen. I was mortified and had to go change, trying to act like it was no big deal. She didn't stop there though. During the movie, she kept bringing up embarrassing stories from when we were kids, making it impossible for me to enjoy any part of the evening. She refused to leave us alone, hovering the whole time. And when Derek was getting ready to head out, Leanne looked right at him and said he could do better than me. He left looking completely uncomfortable and I was left feeling humiliated. Over the years, I tried telling my parents about things like this, how cruel she could be, but they always brushed it off, saying she was just being immature. They never saw the real Leanne. Anytime I brought it up, they'd treat me like I was just making trouble or being dramatic. Eventually, I stopped mentioning it altogether. Leanne remained their golden child, while I, always the more direct one, felt like I didn't really belong in my own family. I threw myself into my schoolwork and managed to get into a good college, which gave me a chance to move out and finally breathe. But whenever I came home during breaks, Leanne made it crystal clear she didn't want me there. She would ignore me completely, barely said a word, and during meals, she'd either interrupt me or sit as far away from me as possible. It was like she couldn't stand the thought of me being around. She also had this habit of taking my things without asking, always claiming she just needed to borrow something, but she'd either break it or never return it. And every time I tried to speak up, my parents would wave it off and tell me we needed to get along. Because of everything going on, I started avoiding coming home during breaks. Instead, I'd come up with reasons to spend that time with friends and their families. Honestly, my parents didn't seem to mind too much. They just figured I was being independent and enjoying life away from home. After Leanne graduated high school, her grades weren't good enough for university, so she ended up going to community college. That meant she never had to leave the house and continue living with our parents. As for me, I've been working out in San Diego at a multinational company, and I really do enjoy what I do. I still talk to my parents now and then, but I rarely go back to visit. I've completely cut ties with Leanne. Now this story really picks up when my dad had a serious heart attack, not quite fatal but close. Thankfully he pulled through and was rushed to the hospital in time. The moment my mom called and told me what happened, I booked a flight and got home as fast as I could. The doctors had him on several medications and said he needed to start exercising regularly. After he got out of the hospital, Dad kept saying he wanted to spend more time with us and was just grateful to still be alive. I understood where he was coming from, so I stayed at the house for a few days. My job allows remote work, so it wasn't an issue. But Leanne didn't seem too happy that I was back. I did everything I could to avoid her, especially with what had just happened to Dad. I figured we were both adults now and there was no reason to stir up drama. One morning at breakfast, Dad brought up the idea of taking a family trip. He said it had been years since we'd gone anywhere together. At first, I wasn't sure about it, but knowing how much it meant to him, I agreed. Leanne wasn't excited about the idea either, but she went along with it anyway. Dad took care of the travel and lodging plans himself. I made sure to schedule my time off from work in advance and let my coworkers know I wouldn't be available. I was genuinely looking forward to spending some time with my parents. But when we got to the airport, I was hit with a surprise: my ticket had been canceled. Dad looked just as confused as I was and kept insisting he had booked and paid for all the tickets. After looking into it more, we found out that out of the 4 tickets he bought, the only one that had been canceled was mine. While I stood there trying to make sense of it all, I glanced over at Leanne. She had this smug, familiar grin on her face. It was the same expression I'd seen so many times in the past, like she was proud of herself for pulling off another stunt. That's when it hit me. She must have canceled my ticket, probably using Dad's computer when no one was looking. I started calling her out right there in the terminal, but she just stood there, smiling without saying a word. I turned to my parents, telling them it had to be her. She never wanted me to go on this trip in the first place. But Mom immediately brushed it off, saying Leanne would never do something like that. She even accused me of being jealous and claimed it was probably just a random glitch. Dad tried to stay neutral, saying maybe it was the airline's fault and I shouldn't jump to conclusions. I couldn't believe it. They still refused to see Leanne for who she really was. And by then it was too late. The flight was full and there were no other options for the day. Sure, I could have flown out the next day, but at that point I didn't see the point. The whole idea was to go on a family trip, not show up late, travel alone, and deal with Leanne the entire time. And the thought of having to share a hotel room with her again? Not exactly something I was looking forward to. I had hoped that maybe with time Leanne had grown up. But if she really was the one who canceled my ticket, I had no idea what other games she'd try to play once we got there. Dad considered postponing the trip so we could plan it again later, but then he started saying how it had been so long since he had taken any kind of vacation. Mom backed Dad up, saying that since I was always traveling for work anyway, I wouldn't be missing much if I didn't join them. That comment stung more than I expected. It was almost like they were relieved I wouldn't be going, as if they were hoping I'd step aside so they wouldn't have to choose between me and Leanne. The way they said it so casually made me feel like I was just an afterthought. I didn't want to argue or beg to be included, so I simply told them they could go ahead without me. And just like that they agreed, no hesitation, no second thoughts. I had hoped, maybe foolishly, that they'd try to convince me to come or at least act like it mattered whether I went or not. But they didn't. They were totally fine going on this family vacation without one member of the family. Even though I didn't want the money spent on my plane ticket and hotel room to go to waste, I couldn't help but feel hurt. The message was loud and clear. They were okay with leaving me behind. For them, it was still a family vacation, even if I wasn't there. So there I stood in the airport terminal, watching my parents and sister head off together while I turned around and made my way back home alone. I decided not to go back to our family house. It didn't feel like home anymore anyway. Instead, I flew straight back to my apartment in San Diego. I told myself I wasn't going to dwell on it. I had the time off work already, so I figured I'd try to make the best of it. I caught up with a few old friends in the area, spent more time outside, went on long walks, and finally got back into reading, something I hadn't had the time or energy for in months. I tried to turn that week into a peaceful solo staycation. While they were away, my parents would call me now and then, showing off the beach, the food, the sights. They were clearly having a great time. And honestly, I was happy that Dad was enjoying himself after everything he'd been through. But still, deep down, I felt left out. It was clear my absence hadn't affected them at all. They were smiling, laughing, having fun, as if nothing was missing. I tried not to let it eat away at me, but the familiar feeling of being excluded lingered. It brought back all the times growing up when Leanne was the favorite, the one who got all the attention while I was the one they brushed aside. As much as I wanted to move past it, some part of me still held onto the hope that one day they'd see Leanne for who she really was, that one day they'd realize I hadn't been making it up all those years. And as it turns out, that moment finally came. About 4 or 5 days into their trip, I woke up to a bunch of missed calls from Mom, dozens of them, one after another. My heart sank. I immediately thought something terrible had happened to Dad. Maybe he'd collapsed or had another heart episode. I didn't waste a second. I called her back right away. She picked up quickly, but her voice was trembling. She sounded shaken, on the verge of tears. I asked if everything was all right, bracing myself for the worst. That's when she told me something had happened, something bad, but not what I expected. She explained that over the past few days, they had started to notice that Dad's heart medication had been disappearing bit by bit. At first, they thought maybe they'd miscounted or misplaced a bottle. But it kept happening. The pills were vanishing and Dad couldn't afford to miss a single dose in his condition. Being in another country, they weren't sure if they'd even be able to find replacements for his specific prescriptions. It was a dangerous situation, and the stress of not knowing where the medicine had gone was eating away at them. Then something unexpected happened. Leanne had gone out for a bit, and Mom went next door to her room to borrow some sunscreen. But while she was in there, something caught her eye: a drawer in Leanne's bedside table slightly ajar. She opened it, and to her horror, there were all of Dad's missing medications. Every single one. Neatly tucked away. Hidden. She called Dad in immediately, and together they realized what had been going on. Leanne had taken his pills intentionally. It was a chilling discovery. The two of them just stood there, stunned, realizing that their so-called miracle child had been putting Dad's life at serious risk for who knows what reason. Mom's voice was cracking as she asked me what they should do. She was genuinely afraid, not just hurt, but afraid of what Leanne had done and what she might do next. I told her not to confront Leanne just yet. I wanted them to come home, gather their thoughts, take time to process it all, and have solid evidence before they said anything. If they tried to talk to Leanne right then and there, I knew she'd twist the whole thing around. She was always good at making up excuses and manipulating her way out of trouble. But something must have happened anyway. Later that night, Dad called me, and this time, he was the one who sounded shaken. He told me Leanne was in jail. I was stunned. I had no idea things had escalated that far, that fast. Apparently, when they brought up the medication, Leanne completely lost it. She started yelling, throwing things, and calling my dad horrible names. She accused him of betraying her, of choosing me over her. She screamed that he had no right to include me in their vacation plans and that if they didn't cut ties with me for good, she'd make sure they regretted it. She wasn't just upset, she was out of control. The scene got so bad that someone from the hotel staff called the police. When they showed up, Leanne didn't calm down. In fact, she got even worse. That's when they arrested her. When the officers got there, Leanne completely refused to calm down. Instead of backing off, she started mouthing off at them, insulting the very people trying to handle the situation. That didn't go over well. She ended up being taken into custody right then and there. It wasn't like my parents could do anything about it either. The police made it clear she'd be held for 24 hours and then released. That was that. Shaken and desperate to get back home before things spiraled further, my parents tried to change their flight and leave early. But their plans fell apart fast because when they went to grab their passports and wallets, they realized they were gone. At first, they thought they had just misplaced them. But the longer they searched, the clearer it became. Leanne had taken them. Either she'd thrown them out or hidden them somewhere. Whatever the case, they were stuck. No passports, no ID, no money. They were stranded in a foreign country, helpless. I think that was the moment things finally started to click for them. For the first time ever, they saw Leanne without the rose-colored glasses. The daughter they always believed could do no wrong had just sabotaged their entire trip and put them in a dangerous, humiliating situation. My mom, who had spent years brushing off everything I ever said about Leanne, finally broke down. She called me, crying, begging for help. She admitted they had no money, no travel documents, and no idea what to do next. She sounded like a completely different person, overwhelmed, shaken, like the world she had clung to for so long had just come crashing down. I told her not to worry and that I'd wire the money right away, but they had to find those passports. Without them, they couldn't fly back home. I knew Leanne hadn't destroyed them. She was cruel but calculated. She wanted control, not permanent damage. And it turned out I was right. After some pressure, my parents finally got her to tell them where the passports were hidden. I think the only reason she gave them up was because they threatened to call the police again. Once they were back home, things came to a head. My parents sat Leanne down and told her, clearly and directly, that it was time for her to leave. That she needed to pack up her things and move out. After years of denial, they'd finally hit their limit. Everything she'd done, stealing life-saving meds, hiding documents, causing chaos, it had all caught up with her. They were terrified she might do something else, like tamper with Dad's medication again. And they were right to be scared. But Leanne didn't take it well. The moment they confronted her, she exploded. Another full-blown screaming match broke out in the living room. She started throwing out accusations left and right, screaming about how they were choosing me over her. She yelled that she didn't want to share her parents with anyone else. She said that inviting me on that trip was the final straw, that it pushed her over the edge. Her voice was full of resentment and anger, and she made it perfectly clear she thought I had no place in the family at all. She kept demanding they cut me off. "You don't need her," she kept saying. "I'm enough for both of you." And it was right then, in the middle of her meltdown, that I think my parents finally saw it, the depth of her jealousy, the bitterness she'd been carrying for years. They tried to calm her down, but Leanne wasn't having it. She went even further, threatening them in a way I don't think they expected. She said she'd tell people they had abused her as a child. She swore she'd accuse them of neglect and mistreatment. She was ready to make up lies just to punish them for asking her to leave. Then she went a step further. She threatened to go to the police and file false charges against them if they didn't back off. That shook my parents to the core. I mean, they're both respected doctors in their community. Their reputation isn't just something they're proud of, it's their entire life. The thought of losing everything they built because of a made-up story from their own daughter? It terrified them. Since then, things haven't calmed down at all. Leanne's still living in the house, and she's making life harder and harder for my parents every single day. She knows they're scared, and she's using that fear to keep control. Every day they call me to give updates. And honestly, I'm worried sick for them. They're stuck walking on eggshells in their own home, trying not to set her off. It's like everything's flipped. After all those years where I was the one they dismissed, now they're the ones living with the consequences of trusting someone who never deserved it. Part of me wants to forgive them. They apologized. They admitted they were wrong. But it's hard, really hard, to let go of the years I spent feeling unloved, pushed aside, and ignored. So no, I don't think I'm wrong for not rushing to forgive them just because they've now had a taste of what I went through. They chose Leanne over me time and time again. And now that she's turned on them, they're finally coming to me, asking for help and understanding. Maybe that's fair. Maybe it's karma. Or maybe it's just too little too late. Once Leanne found out that our parents had started calling me regularly again, she completely lost it. One evening, in a fit of rage, she began smashing dishes in the kitchen. And that was only the beginning. She's made it a daily mission to torment them, stealing their car keys, hiding them, making it nearly impossible for them to get to work or run errands. It's like she wants to trap them in the house. Just the other night, my mom called me crying. She was exhausted, both physically and emotionally. Leanne had thrown a tantrum during dinner because Mom wouldn't cook a separate meal just for her. Mom had just gotten home after a long shift, and when she told Leanne she was too tired, Leanne snapped. She started flipping over chairs, slamming drawers, even cracking the leg on a coffee table. Afterward, she stormed into her room, cranked her music up full blast, and left it blasting all night so my parents couldn't sleep. Each day, things seemed to spiral a little more out of control. I'd hoped that once my parents saw who Leanne really was, things would start to get better. But now I'm honestly scared she might hurt them. Her behavior isn't just manipulative anymore, it's dangerous. I wish I could go home and help, but right now, showing up might just set her off even more. The last thing I want is to make things worse. Instead, I've been urging my parents to speak with a lawyer. At this point, legal action may be the only way to protect them and bring some peace back into their lives. My parents took my advice. And after filing a complaint, Leanne's finally been arrested. And I hate to say it, but this was bound to happen. A few nights ago, things hit rock bottom. Leanne got into another screaming match with our parents, but this time, she escalated it beyond anything she'd done before. She grabbed a kitchen knife and came at them. Thankfully, they weren't hurt, but they were absolutely terrified. My dad didn't hesitate, he called the police immediately. Officers arrived quickly and arrested Leanne on the spot for assault. It was surreal. After all those years of protecting her, my parents were the ones calling the cops on her. With Leanne in custody, my parents knew they couldn't keep going on like this. They consulted an attorney and were told the best step forward was to file for an official eviction. They didn't want to press further charges, they just wanted her out of the house, out of their lives, at least for now. Once Leanne was bailed out, she was handed a formal eviction notice. Everything was legally documented, why she had to leave and by when. My parents worked closely with their lawyer to make sure the paperwork was airtight. Leanne wouldn't be able to weasel her way out of it or claim she wasn't properly informed. Then came the hardest part, they had to take her to court. Suing their own daughter wasn't something they ever thought they'd do. It tore them apart. But they knew it was the only option left if they wanted to feel safe again. The judge reviewed everything and finally issued a court order. Leanne had to leave the property. If she didn't, law enforcement would step in to remove her. She's set to be out by next week. My parents are already starting to breathe easier. Even though the emotional weight is still heavy, they know this isn't the end of the road, but it's a step toward healing and reclaiming their home. It's been a painful process, full of guilt, fear, and regret, but they've taken a stand. And that means something. I've stayed in close contact with them through all of it. I've invited them to stay with me in San Diego for a few weeks. After everything they've been through, they need a change of pace. A quiet space where they can rest and reset. I just want to give them a break from all the stress Leanne brought into their lives. And maybe in this new space we can finally reconnect. No chaos, no yelling, just a chance to be together. Some people suggested we look into whether Leanne might be dealing with a mental health issue. And honestly, that thought has crossed our minds too. The problem is she's an adult now. We can't force her to get evaluated or treated unless she agrees. And with her current state, sudden outbursts, emotional instability, we're afraid that trying to push her into anything will just make matters worse. As I mentioned earlier, my parents are now staying with me in San Diego. It's been a few days, and for the first time in what feels like forever, they're starting to relax. Last night, we sat around the dinner table in my apartment. Nothing fancy, just a simple home-cooked meal. But the peace in that moment felt like a gift. They opened up to me. Their words were quiet, filled with guilt, but also humility. For the first time, I think they fully understood just how much I had been carrying all those years. And maybe, just maybe, we're starting to rebuild something real between us. That evening, as we sat together after dinner, my parents looked me in the eyes and admitted they had been blind to Leanne's true nature all these years. They didn't try to make excuses, just asked for my forgiveness. My dad, with more regret in his voice than I'd ever heard before, said he was sorry for not listening to me sooner. He confessed they'd never imagined Leanne could become someone capable of hurting the people closest to her. They were fooled by her sweet demeanor, unable to see the manipulative side that I'd dealt with for so long. My mom echoed his words, her voice shaky as she talked about how wrong they had been. For years they brushed off my concerns, writing them off as sibling rivalry. Now she understood just how much damage that favoritism had caused. She said she felt ashamed, heartbroken that they had made me feel like a stranger in my own family. I let them know I appreciated them finally recognizing the truth. It wasn't easy, but it meant something. I started sharing with them some of the things I'd gone through. Memories I'd buried because they were too painful. I talked about the loneliness, the betrayal, and the way Leanne's cruelty had made me feel so invisible growing up. As I spoke, they sat there, stunned. You could see the guilt settle in as they realized the depth of what I'd carried alone all these years. They told me they never meant to make me feel like the outsider. That after losing a baby years ago, they'd seen Leanne's birth as a miracle. A second chance they never thought they'd get. That label, miracle child, had shaped the way they treated her, putting her on a pedestal without even realizing the cost. Now, with a heavy dose of reality, they saw that blind adoration had clouded their judgment. Hearing them finally acknowledge their mistakes, it was bittersweet. I'd waited my whole life for them to see me, really see me, and this was the moment. No, it wasn't perfect. And no, I couldn't just flip a switch and trust them again. But it was a start. We agreed to move forward slowly, to rebuild what had been broken one step at a time. For now, while they're staying with me in San Diego, I want to make the most of this time together. Over the past few days, we've been enjoying simple moments, strolling through the streets of San Diego, sharing meals, talking late into the night. It's been healing in ways I didn't expect. We've been learning how to be a family again, without the weight of denial pressing down on us. Through our conversations, I've come to realize that their visit isn't just about getting away from Leanne. It's also about starting fresh, rebuilding trust, reclaiming relationships we almost lost to silence and avoidance. That said, we couldn't ignore the elephant in the room, Leanne. She's currently staying at a friend's house, and while her behavior has been unacceptable, none of us can bring ourselves to just walk away from her entirely. She's still family, and my parents, especially, feel responsible for her no matter what she's done. We've begun to consider that Leanne's behavior might be more than just manipulative or selfish. It could be a sign of something deeper going on, something that needs professional help. We're not sure. but it's become clear that we need to find out. The challenge, of course, is that she's an adult. We can't legally force her into a mental health evaluation, and pushing her too hard might only make things worse. Still, we want to try. My parents are planning to reach out to her once they're back home to see if she'd be open to talking. As for me, I'm staying out of direct contact with Leanne for now. The tension between us is still raw, and I don't want to make her spiral further. I've advised my parents, for their safety and hers, to meet in a neutral public place if they do get together. That way, emotions are less likely to boil over again. What we want, what we truly hope for, is not revenge or punishment. It's understanding, healing. We just want Leanne to realize how much we care about her, and how her actions have impacted everyone around her. It's not about blaming her. It's about trying to hold on to what's left of our family before it's too late. For the first time in a long while, it feels like we're moving in the right direction.